I don't know about you, but as the news gets darker and the world feels more divided, I'm increasingly in the mood for theatre that brings people together. Big stories, timeless tales of the human spirit that bring us cheer, excite us, fortify us, bring us insight and light. So with that in mind, I've put together a season of plays for next year to bolster the spirits, full of work by names that deserve to be in lights: William Shakespeare, Edmund Rostand, Ella Hickson, J.M. Barrie, Bill Forsyth, Zinnie Harris. I hope these stories will captivate you as much as they've captivated me, and we at the Lyceum will be pulling out all the stops to bring them to the stage in remarkable productions. We open with Twelfth Night, Shakespeare's beautiful tale of love and belonging. When Viola is washed up on the shore of Illyria, she's thrown into a world of blurred genders, music and mischief. Here's Wills Wilson to tell us about her psychedelic take on this bittersweet comedy.
Twelfth Night is very famous for its first line, which is, "If music be the food of love, play on." Everybody knows that. That's like a little kind of introduction to the whole play. So it's about music and food, or having a party, a kind of get-together, kind of conviviality, and love. And so it's got these very, very sort of strong themes that are played out among a group of really eccentric characters, lovers. There are love plots, and then comedy characters where there's a lot of practical jokes and trickery. Anything can happen, and anyone can become anything at Twelfth Night. That was why I was drawn to this idea of this sort of 60s and edging into the 70s, of a time when identity, gender, class was all being challenged. Twelfth Night is the most musical play that Shakespeare ever wrote. One of the really early starting points of the play was talking to Malia Jones, who's a Welsh singer-songwriter. His music is modern, sometimes quite poppy and accessible, but because he trained as a classical musician as well, it's also quite baroque and complex. I think people like Twelfth Night because it's one of his funniest plays. The comedy of it is in the characters and the relationships. In every sort of lovely pearl of a moment, there's always this bit of grit as well, which hopefully gives it all a sort of bite. But generally, it's got really strong kind of beating heart to it that I really love.
What better place to talk about the seductive power of words than here in front of the monument to Robert Burns? Serrano de Bergerac is a classic story of poetry and desire, adapted for the stage by the first Macker of Scotland, Edwin Morgan. Here's Brian Ferguson, who's going to be donning the iconic big nose of the title role, to tell us more.
I read it and had so many questions about him. He's such an enigmatic character, I think. He's deeply in love with his cousin, Roxanne, but Serrano has a rather large nose, and he doesn't think that he'll ever be able to win Roxanne's love. And then what happens is there's a very young, good-looking guy that comes along who's really into Roxanne as well, and Roxanne really likes him. The young, good-looking guy, Christian, is very gorgeous, but can't really string two words together. So Serrano, who is also a poet, ends up writing the words that he then delivers to Roxanne. So you have comedy, real comedy moments within that, and also that's where the tragedy comes through as well. It's a real feast for the eyes when you're reading it, the Edwin Morgan translation. It's all written in Glaswegian, which brings such a comedy to it. Love, honour, swagger and noses.
For Christmas, we return to the quintessential children's story of magic and escape when we stage Wendy and Peter Pan, the story of Neverland, the Lost Boys, fairies, and of course, pirates.
Neverland is a magical place. It's a place where your imagination can completely roam free. Our Neverland's going to feel a bit rough and ready. It's a bit like Edinburgh, really. It's going to feel magical and a bit wild.
Wendy and Peter Pan is a new adaptation of the J.M. Barrie story. It's the same story that we all know and love,
And it takes place in Neverland with Captain Hook and Peter Pan and the pirates and the Lost Boys. But in our version of the story, Wendy takes a leading role. It's a really exciting take on the story because Wendy actually gets to do all the fun stuff, the stuff that normally only the boys get to do in these kind of stories. So she'll be swashbuckling with swords and flying and fighting pirates and taking on Captain Hook with Peter Pan. It's something that will be entertaining for you whether you're 7 or 70. It's going to be a massive event piece. So we're actually standing on Ann Street at the moment, which was an inspiration for Barry's play Quality Street. And which he thought of as one of the most beautiful streets in Edinburgh. I studied up here at university, so did Ella Hickson, who adapted the story, and so did J.M. Barrie. The Lyceum is probably one of the most beautiful theatres in the UK. I never fail to just have this amazing sense of wonder every time I walk into the auditorium. So it feels like the perfect place to be bringing Wendy and Peter Pan for Christmas.
I love mountains. Great big slabs of nature that remind us how small we are. We're lucky to have one right in the middle of Edinburgh. But imagine a hill 20 times the size of Arthur's Seat in the remote Peruvian Andes. Sula Grande, the location for Joe Simpson's Touching the Void. In 1985, Joe Simpson and Simon Yates were on an expedition to Sula Grande, a mountain in Peru, climbing a new route. On the way down, Joe Simpson broke his leg. Simon Yates, in a really daring rescue attempt, tried to lower Joe down the mountain, but in the end reached an impasse and was forced to do the thing that climbers never want to do, never dream of doing. There was no way out of the situation except to cut the rope on Joe Simpson. Joe was left, abandoned, effectively in the bottom of a crevasse, as close to death as you can possibly get. If it was just a climbing story, that wouldn't draw me in. I'm fascinated by the thought of how do you come back from a point where death is so close to you that it's easier to let go than to fight on. And what attracts me to this story is Joe Simpson's incredible sort of determination and courage, and where he finds the resource to continue to struggle through an unimaginable situation. One of the things I love about theatre is that it's a type of poetry, it's a type of metaphor. You obviously can't realistically stage a mountain on stage, so that means we're going to have to invent some really imaginative, clever, thoughtful ways to bring this story out. Some people will know the story already. It was an incredibly successful book and film, and I think those people are going to get a surprise in how we've chosen to tell it and retell it. It's a story of survival, and it is extraordinary, but actually one of the biggest things about it is that I think it suggests that that's within us all. So I think for me the interesting thing is the universal nature of the story, that somehow all of us contain the seed of being able to pull ourselves out of a crevasse. Local Heroes, a story of love, longing and landscape set on the west coast of Scotland. It's directed by John Crowley, with new songs by Mark Knopfler and a script by Bill Forsyth and me. Local Hero the Musical is about an American oil man who's given the task of going to Scotland to buy a village on the west coast to build a refinery. So the story is, how do they play out this dilemma about really what something is worth? Can you put a price on a landscape, a place and a community?
What's rather interesting is you got, two people who come to it adoring and cherishing the film, but equally relishing the opportunity of sort of transposing it into another form, and the fact that there's a whole extra new musical song element in it, which takes it to a different place.
When we started talking about it, Mark and David and I, lo and behold, within a few months, Mark said, I've got some songs. So he had just got so enthusiastic that he'd gone away, and I think he came back with 7 or 8 songs. So it was a thrill to have these songs to kind of work into, because the songs were like stepping stones.
For me, it was wonderful going back into Local Hero. I mean, I really didn't expect it ever to come back to me, as a musical. So it was great to come back together and take up the reins again.
I mean, he's such an astonishing craftsman as a songwriter, and has always been able to write a heartbreaking ballad, and also to be able to do fabulous character sketches. And he's been able to play with both elements in this rather gloriously.
The people who love the film, I think for them it will be encountering something that you think you know, but rediscovering it anew.
I think people come to see a musical to have a good time, really, to have a good night, and I think they will.
Our last play of the season is a story of sexual jealousy and murder. Zinnie Harris has been tearing up UK theatre recently with her fierce explorations of women's lives wrested from the great plays of the canon. In This Restless House, she rewrote the Oresteia. Now, in The Duchess of Malfi, she turns her pen to Jacobean revenge tragedy.
So there's a lovely quote from T.S. Eliot about Webster. It goes, "Webster was much possessed by death and saw the skull beneath the skin." I don't think there's any point doing a production of Duchess of Malfi, or even a new version of Duchess of Malfi, if you are afraid of blood. I think it's the sort of story that, you know, is played on a big epic scale. It's dark and it's light and it's gory and it's glorious for that. The story is amazing. It is this wonderful tale of illicit affairs, deception, brothers spying on their sister, power play. Right at the centre there's this woman who is this kind of incredible, almost modern character, ahead of her time I think, who kind of refuses to do what she's told, and the kind of men around her are filled with this rage because they can't control her. I think she can be sort of an inspiration to us now. She's strong to her core. She's also sexy, feminine, and she has this incredible resilience, which ultimately becomes very inspiring. The wider discussion that we're having about women and their power and their sexuality and how that fits into a workplace. I think there's also a discussion going on in the theatre about women in plays and at the centre of plays, and I just was very drawn to The Duchess of Malfi, not only as a tale that was written in its time, but also can really reflect on what we're currently discussing and thinking about. So what I hope is that audiences will see a play that has its feet and ankles in the original and in the past, but that is also sort of blossoming into a play that feels more like a contemporary piece of work. 3 words to describe the show: epic, theatrical and bloody.
Tickets are on sale now. Whether you'd like to buy a season ticket for all the shows, check out what we're doing in the festivals, or find out about our lifelong learning activities, pick up a brochure, and we look forward to seeing you at the Lyceum.